Hey there, everybody. I am joined by a motley crew 2 days after Christmas, a day after Christmas. What is time? But we're here to give you the Q4 Star Wars CCG market report. We do this once a quarter to try to help people figure out how the heck to interpret the numbers, the data. We want to make sure that people are making buying decisions transparently and that we kind of talk about this broader marketplace. So I thought it would be fun to start out with a question, which is, we'll go around the room. We'll start with Cam, but what's the most interesting thing and the most predictable thing that you've kind of seen over the last year in the Star Wars CCG market?
Hey guys, happy holidays. Day after Christmas. I didn't have a Star Wars sweater, so I got a Game of Thrones one out of the closet.
Love the Hodor one.
But so the most interesting thing was the PSA 18 returns were returned a ton of cards. We expected the inventory to flood, and just curious how it was going to impact things. However, I remember saying at one point I expected to see like about 10 PSA 10 Darth Vader gem mints, and we still only have two, Mark having one of them. And still only have two Luke Skywalker Black Border PSA 10s. Still only have one Executor Dagobah PSA 10, which grades better. So I'm kind of shocked at, I guess, how hard PSA graded this mass return and how few there are out there. Yeah, very interesting. But we did get, I hate the garbage slab term, but, there was also a lot of, so that means a lot of things were returned PSA 7 and below, which, is borderline worth grading. And we saw, I think one of the things I expected to see was these very rare reflection foils, a very niche thing, because it sounds scarce, the term very rare, but it's actually the most common foil, and there's tons of them out there.
It's a fun scale. You got the very rare, super rare, then ultra rare, right? Just like playing with language soup here, right? But yeah, the very rares.
Yeah, and it's almost like the tempting ring in Lord of the Rings. It's like, it's a shiny Princess Leia card, and it says very rare. So like early on, and it is a cool card, but the pure like the lack of scarcity of them. There's so many of the specific example I had was Princess Organa Reflections 1. We've seen stuff like that kind of go down because a lot of those cards were easily accessible and easily graded in the PSA 8 form.
Okay, cool. Greg, give me your most interesting thing you've seen in 2022 relating to Star Wars CCG. I don't, not like you saw Avatar.
Many an interesting thing. Yeah, I don't have any kind of big picture things, but like I'm always like, there's these small things that I'm always kind of baffled by that I find funny. So, for instance, like from the Death Star 2 ultra rares, like the Luke generally outsells the Emperor. Like that's just like a thing. Generally, it tends to sort of strongly outsell or maybe weakly outsell, but it's always the dominant one. And then every once in a while, there's just like a couple months where Emperors become like super popular and just like dominate the sort of ultra rare sales from Death Star 2. I always wonder like what's going on there, if there's like a meta change and suddenly people need more Emps, but like for instance, the last couple months, Emperors have been outselling Luke's like 2 or 3 to 1 out of nowhere.
So can I throw out a theory for that? Because I just did this myself. I forget the actor's name, Ian McDermott, I think, but he's on a signing circuit right now. So I just had an Emperor signed. So that was why, perhaps there was just a bump in enough people that wanted to get the signature from him being on the whatever convention circuit. I think I got mine in October-ish. So just an idea. Maybe that's just a little bump.
November and December have been big months. I don't remember if October too. But yeah, anyway, like it's like little things like these are always interesting when you see, these kinds of shifts in frequency. Another little thing is it's so Coruscant AIs have been doing really well this year. They've actually continued to increase this year, even while some other things have decreased. But feed AIs have just decreased. And I never, it's like, it seems like, the AIs, especially from those two sets, would kind of, to some degree, rise and fall together. But they're not, they're moving in different directions right now. And I find that interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Mark, you want to say hello?
I can say hello. I can say a few more things too. First of all, I don't look like I'm wearing anything as festive as you guys, but I did wear this, which is a Big Pharma shirt, so it's a hive of scum and villainy. So I thought I'd fit in with the Star Wars theme there. I think I'll go with the predictable one first, just because that's more fun that way to keep the suspense. as one might expect with the economy kind of being questionable right now, prices have kind of fallen across the board. You know, people deciding graded are like lame and things like that. Like prices just kind of go down a little bit. So that's pretty predictable. But the thing that's interesting actually is that to me, a lot of the cards that gain interest sometimes are just really random cards. Like some of the random red cards people just find a liking for, and they actually seem to sell pretty well. Like I think this week I actually didn't check, but I think, and it makes sense in hindsight, the I Am Your Father Cloud City card actually sold for quite a decent amount for TSA Cloud City. I think it sold for 20 something. But yeah, I think that's what I think is interesting, is there's a lot of cards that people can like because they're iconic, not just the main character cards.
Yeah. I'll go last here. So I think for me, the thing that's been really fascinating over 2022 is the vibrancy of the market. So it's not just eBay, right? It's you've got like category 1 games going on all, pistons here, like firing off. You have Fred's new store. You have like, 5 online stores of all, somewhat reputability. It used to just be that Boba Fett guy, right? It was like, will you get your stuff from the store? And so it's been a really interesting evolution of almost institutionalizing this a little bit, where there's, not just one place to go. There's like 3 or 4 large sellers where you can find the stuff. It may not be at your ideal price, but I think that's been the most surprising thing, is that sort of the evolution of this market and it becoming a little more mature, as well as just all the different aspects of it. We're talking grading, we're talking sealed. I think 2 years ago, saying the word graded in these communities, you'd be like cast out. Mark was a heretic for a long time. He still kind of is a heretic, but that's been the really interesting thing for me to kind of just watch it evolve, and it's been exciting. So let's get into some of the data. So I think we want to talk what's up, what's down. Greg, do you kind of want to lead that discussion a little bit?
Sure, happy to. If you want to pull up that screen share. So
we generally graphs.
We're ready.
We got graphs this time, guys.
I mean, generally speaking, for those who have been watching these before, the trends that I mentioned last time have continued, though maybe a bit more significantly last time. That is, prices have decreased a bit, and sales frequency has continued to decrease a bit as well. The market is still pretty strong though, and especially for some high value singles, it's been doing extremely well. But what I have up here right now is just sale averages from the last 6 months, right? So I have a sort of Q3 versus Q4 comparison. I have here Premier through like Ref 3 Premium and the Ref 1 foil. I left out Ref 2 foil and Ref 3 foil and Torno foil just because like over the short span of time, they get very few data points, right? And so there wasn't going to be really anything meaningful on this chart.
I feel like it also breaks your axes, right? Where all of a sudden,
that's right. Everything would be so small in comparison. But anyway, with those left out, you can see here, from Q3 to Q4, there has been a decrease on average across all of these sets, about 11% of decrease. But you can see there's, a differential here. So, most sets have decreased a little bit. Some have decreased quite a bit. Theed and Ref 3 Premium in particular have decreased quite a lot. That's about 30% for each of those. Endor and Ref 2 have decreased about 20%. Coruscant looks like it's decreased quite a bit, but certainly in sheer dollar amounts it has. But as a percentage of its price, it's actually kind of in line with the decrease from most of the other sets. 2 sets have increased in price, Premier and Ref 1 foils, slightly, right? But so that's sort of where we stand in terms of how things have slightly changed, over the last couple months since we last did this.
So volume-wise, have we seen less sales, right? Or what's the sort of volume picture like? Is it more vibrant, less vibrant?
Yeah, so volume-wise, things are also down. Here's a chart with some volume data as well. Again, this is Q3 versus Q4. So the blue bars are the third quarter, the red bars are the fourth quarter. And yeah, there's been a decrease here as well. For some sets, obviously, like an extremely large decrease. You can see like Premier, A New Hope, Dagobah, Jabba's Palace have decreased quite a bit. Others less so. And a few again have increased as well. But I guess one thing to say about this though, because I was wondering, what what this, I mean, obviously from Q2 to Q3, there's a decrease as well, but I was wondering what this might mean, especially because this seemed like a pretty large decrease. So on average, sets from quarter 3 to quarter 4 have decreased, all the sets on average decreased about like 30%, which is significant. But I looked to 2021 and I looked at the decrease from Q3 to Q4 in 2021, and there was a similar decrease of about like 22% or something like that. So, I mean, one thing to just note here is that assuming last year's data, last year's trends are any indication of a sort of yearly trend, it could just be that there's a kind of yearly decrease in the last couple months of each year of the sort of frequency of people buying.
I mean, it's also, it's the holidays, right? People are putting money towards like Christmas presents and maybe not towards collecting as much, right? I will say that it always feels like there's a winter, like a January, February, March sort of like increase because people are stuck inside, because it's cold and there's really nothing to do in the month of February. So why not?
Yeah, we definitely saw that at the beginning of 2022, the sort of decrease or an increase in sales in the first couple months. So yeah, so anyway, that's just to say, like, while this seems like a kind of significant decrease, it could be roughly in line with previous trends. I mean, it's also worth noting there's like 5 days left in the year. So if, it would only take another, 5 to 10 sets to sell to bring those numbers like far closer in line in terms of like, at least the decrease this year would just be a kind of match for the decrease in the previous year, or at least close to. I have actually, let me go back here. I wanted to say sort of one more thing about this as well, which is that I was wondering what could potentially explain the sort of big decrease in the price of feed and Ref3 and some of these other ones that had like the largest decreases. And I looked back to some of the earlier data from, earlier this year, and it looked like these blue bars, these Q3 prices, were themselves, generally speaking, a decrease in average price from Q2, right? So mostly in Q3, all the sets were already starting to go down. The exceptions to that were actually Feed, Ref3 Premium, and Endor, which had all gone up in the third quarter. And so, which is one thing to say is that like, these 3 sets that had the biggest decrease were also the only ones that bucked the trend in the last quarter. And it could just be with small sample sizes, there were a couple outliers that were like significantly increasing the average price of that set. And really, this is more of like a market correction than any kind of worrying decrease in these sets. In particular, I looked at Feed and Ref3, they had like 2 data points for all of the third quarter. So like the average sale price you're seeing in those blue bars for Q3 is like, as a result of very few data points, which I think go a long way in explaining why maybe they've seemingly crashed more than the other ones. And this was the sort of last thing I want to show here. This is just sort of yearly trends. On the top, you have average price of all black border sets, but excluding AI and foils from throughout the year. And below that, you have the sort of sales volume over the course of the year. So you can see a kind of slight increase, at the beginning of 2022 with a slight decrease into Q3, and then a bigger drop this last quarter. Although note, given the scale on the y-axis there, that as a percentage of the sort of total price there, that $600 drop is not as significant as it might seem in that in the chart. Oop. I don't know what I just did.
Nice zoom in.
There we go.
I'm going to turn this off here, and maybe we can just kind of turn to the group. I'd love to kind of get some reactions from Mark and Cam here on what their thoughts are. I think that it feels like there's always a little bit of a holiday slowdown with collectibles, but I'm curious if you guys have any other takes from sort of Greg's data there.
Yeah, I mean, we're staring at a gloomy 2023 at a macroeconomic level where the rate hikes keep coming. This has all been, if you're following the economic outlook closely, this has all been expected. Real estate's going down for the first time in years. And, 2023, I don't have a very bullish outlook for it across the board. I think it's going to be tough times. I think we're going to see some economic trickle down impacts. And so how does that relate to a niche dead collectible card game? I have no clue, but I think I would temper expectations heading into 2023, but that could present great buying opportunities if we do see a dip relative to that we're seeing in other markets across like the stock market or real estate.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to like one quick thing, and then we'll hop to Mark. One thing Scott Church told me, which was really surprising, Scott Church, who runs Category 1 Games, this huge marketplace, is that, during the 2008 recession, they actually did just fine because people during recessions, they don't put in the new jacuzzi or they don't install the new driveway, but they still want these small little comforts. So maybe that's going to say that the ultra rares for $500, maybe buy whatever, $70 set of Jabba's Palace, right? And so people still want to have something that they enjoy doing, but they're not going to put in a brand new like jacuzzi or something, right? The extravagant purchases and the really like luxury things are what hurt, and not necessarily the small, like magic sales or something. Mark, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think Cam covered that aspect pretty well of just the future outlook in terms of the general economy kind of trickling into other things. I think another aspect that may have hurt collectibles also is kind of the whole crypto thing going on right now, where there's lots of awareness that there's a lot of not so above the board stuff happening there. So people are a little antsy as to non-traditional investment vehicles at the moment. Lots of other, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later, a lot of other collecting card categories have been clobbered a little bit. I did think it was interesting though in the graph that Greg that you showed that the price, or was the volume of like the pre-special edition sets seemed to be particularly affected. I'm not really sure what would have caused that, but I just thought that was interesting when you showed it.
That was actually the one note I wrote down here was, I wonder, it kind of touched on a point Matt made in one of his recent videos, is if it's a smaller niche community and there's a completionist out there, these maybe sometimes they go down the line, Premier, A New Hope, Hoth, they're cheaper sets in general too. So maybe there's some indication that people are filling up their sets there.
I certainly saw that in the original wave, when the pandemic hit and, there was just this huge boom, right, for Star Wars CCG. It really went in waves with like those early sets selling a lot at first, and the later sets not really selling, then the later sets selling, then, the foil sets and the AIs, so it was like really over the course of a year, you saw these like 3 months waves with which sets were popular. And so it could be that is just circling back and we're sort of continuing to ride that wave. It's hard to know, but yeah, it very much looks like those early sets had a steeper drop off this last quarter than the rest of the sets.
Interesting. All right, should we shift here to talk a little about the graded and sealed market? I know this is something that Mark and Cam kind of track pretty closely, so I'm gonna hand it over to the two of them here.
Yeah, and great point on the crypto fear, Mark. I think that people, even myself as someone who's invested in sports card marketplaces, companies, like I still kind of lump the alternate asset space in with crypto personally. So it's just kind of, there is definitely fear on that right now. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, so I'll give a quick overview of some graphs and then I'll let Mark dive in more granularly. Shout out to our new assistant, Jerome, helping Mark and I out with the data now. If you spot any errors, we can add them to the Facebook group.
How did you get an assistant? How do I
we were like an actual company. He'd be like intern Jerome, but we'll bring him on a show next year, Q4 2023.
You want to just zoom in here a little bit, like control plus it, just so we
Sure.
can see it a little bit closer here. Yeah, it might just be good to make it a little bit bigger for folks.
All right. So in terms of sample size, like Greg was talking about, so one thing I think we've realized as a show is what we're doing here is we're breaking down the Star Wars CCG market from 3 lenses. The first is complete sets. The second is sealed wax. And the third is graded, the most recent one to enter. Historically, we've always sold sets and sealed. So I think we're taking 3 different looks from 3 different angles, kind of trying to, with the goal of the show, paint a picture of where the overall market's at mostly from a collector standpoint, but also for players out there too, who just love the game. So I'm going to give a quick overview. We also did sales volume for sealed and graded. Just a disclaimer, the graded charts kind of pick themselves because there is such a small sample size. So For example, I had to, when there's a bunch of Darth Vader graded, there's within that, there's PSA 10, PSA 9, PSA 8. So to find like 5 Darth Vader PSA 8 sales is kind of hard. There's just not many. So the ones chosen for that were just based on cards that had recent sales that had around 5 or more total sales. But on the sealed end, which we're going to start with, there's a lot more sample size to work with. So you'll see in the total sales volume, and we don't have December data in here yet because we're filming this the day after Christmas. November, for a frame of reference, is just under 40 boxes. October was one of the lowest in the last 18 months. This June was one of the lowest in the last 18 months. But the total sales volume, we saw, to Greg's point, we do see some cyclical dips. There was a dip in October and a spike in November. I don't know why. December, January, and then February, March spike. So it'll be interesting to kind of come back and see if February and March are cyclical in that. March are cyclical in that regard. A few examples. I know Matt loved to talk about Tatooine sealed, and he was right. This thing took one of the bigger spikes we've seen during the 2020 COVID spike. It's kind of still hung in there and kept its value to some degree and has a nice positive corollary line. Death Star 2, this is one that's more or less stayed as a high-end set, kind of stayed the course with a gradual incline and not taking too much of a hit through November. And then here's one that we're kind of are seeing a regression on, which is the Premier Limited sealed boxes. Matt, do you want me to pause before I get integrated?
Yeah, I was curious. You want to go down to the Death Star 2 one?
Sure.
This to me is not at all surprising, just because I think it's a law of large numbers, right? So it's just way harder for something to double in value when it's already, $1,000 to 2,000 than it is for Tatooine to go from 300 to 600, right? It's just an easier thing for that to happen. So I think that's sort of what's happening with a lot of this high end stuff. It's just to double from 1,500, you start hitting 3,000, and people start getting a little more nervous about sending $3,000 over the internet to somebody versus $300, right? So I just think it's a bit of a law of large numbers case when it looks the higher end stuff, even though it's
very
cool.
And this is the one set that stands out with the 2 ultra rares. I would note Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, and Palpatine. So there's just always going to be that excitement to chase those 2.
Cool. Let's talk graded.
Graded, we have. I just started with this year at January. There was under 25. I think that's we started technically going back last year, but this is basically a picture of the graded market. So what is contextually of note here is that there was the backlog with PSA. Mark can maybe elaborate his thoughts on how that's impacted the market, but PSA 18 became a term known around the industry. So a lot of more cards are actually getting returned now. So we are obviously seeing a sales volume spike in graded, which is great. Mark can talk about it, but we've seen a lot of new names regularly selling on eBay, Bassman, the FSU Knoll and Bucks, like a lot of regular sellers, regular collectors that just weren't here before, which is awesome. So we're definitely seeing that market kind of grow right now. But if you dive in within each card, there might be some decline from COVID. So for example, we had Yoda PSA 8. Here's 5 sales. On August, this card went for 100 and it's back down under 50 now. But you can kind of see, and what I like in some of these is you do see a healthy floor being established. There's going to be some, irregardless of the COVID excitement that was taking place, there's just going to be some natural variance. And we're definitely seeing some floors and emerge. Nothing's just dropping out of the clouds. Here's an example of one that stood flat. Princess Leia, Cloud City, PSA 9. Those are about as consistent as you can get sales-wise. So we're not seeing anything there. Mara Jade, Emperor's Hand, foil PSA 8. One outlier kind of sale, slight decline, I would say. And let me know if you want me to stop and pause.
Yeah, I'm just going to just jump in here. And guys, feel free to jump in as well. Like, the thing that's most amazing about all of this is the fact that there is actually sales data for every month. Like, if you think a year ago, you probably wouldn't have had monthly sales for each of these cards for a PSA 8, right? I think that to me is such a growth from a year ago where it's like there might have been one sale of a Mara Jade foil PSA 8, for 6 months, not one a month, like pretty consistently. So to me, that's just like a really interesting sign of growth and interest because somebody's buying these ultimately. So yeah. I think it's a good sign for that market.
And to my lead-in point, we're going to see a lot more of the PSA 8s. The PSA 10s are just continue to remain. They're remaining more elusive than I even ever projected. So we're going to see more of the PSA 8s. And I think on this show, we'll use those to kind of highlight market trends more. I'm not going to speak to the 10s and maybe even the 9s as much. This one's interesting because it's the ultra rare foil. I think this is Reflections 2, right? Yeah. Okay. And PSA 8, we had a drop in September, but a healthy bounce back, spike back in 2021. So I don't know what to comment on this graph. I just thought it was an interesting one for a very interesting card. And then the infamous, this is the one that might implore some dark comings, is the very popular Darth Vader PSA 8. Its most recent sale was down below, right above the $100 mark, which is about 2x raw, I believe. And at one point, this card had sold for over $400. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. That could go to our point about Premier in general. Everyone's kind of getting their iconic Darth Vader PSA 8, or that could be a good indicator of where the market is right now. Mark, what's your take on this data as the Darth Grader, the number one seller of graded Star Wars CCG?
Yeah, let me get to that. Sorry, I just got it posted. I mean, you had a lot of great questions there. First of all, let me try to address them in chronological order. I think first you brought up the $18 submission and how that's kind of affecting the market in general. And I would say that, like you said, there's a lot of new sellers on eBay that's led to a lot of this increased volume that you see on the screen right now. I do think that compared to, say, a year ago, where I was like probably one of the only 2 or 3 sellers on eBay selling regularly, there was kind of like a frenzy of like, well, these are the only graded cards you can even get, because you can't really even submit to PSA and get them in any reasonable amount of time. Whereas now we're seeing with these $18 grading, you're able to get them back in like 2 or 3 months. So I think it's healthy in terms of getting like a accurate supply and demand interaction going on, as opposed to it just trickling into the market slowly. So I think that's great in terms of getting these out there to people who want them. In terms of the Darth Vader PSA 8, I know we've kind of mentioned a few times, there were originally, I believe it's on the Star Wars CCG Players Committee forum. There's a post that links to an old web archive of the cipher, but there were 100,000 Darth Vader black borders that were originally printed. And of course, a lot of these have probably been lost to attrition over the years, played in decks, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's right, exactly. So, although I think it's only immune to attrition like -5 or something, I think, for black border Vader. But anyways, so as many people watching this video probably know, Premier Black Border is a little bit rough out of the pack. You probably expect on average about a PSA 8, so probably about average pack fresh condition.
Tell us your PSA 10 story, since you have one of the 2 PSA 10s. We need to hear it.
Oh, the PSA 10, how I got the PSA 10?
Yes, and how was, I believe it was in a booster pack.
I think so. I think it was in a booster pack. Yeah. Did I open that live on the channel? I'm not entirely certain. I was opening packs because I sometimes get the repacks, and yeah, I pulled it from one of those booster boxes that I was cracking. It's really great, and I'm actually excited that you showed that chart that shows Premier booster boxes are going down in price, because I'm gonna have to probably hunt some down and crack some more boxes with that visual there. But yeah, I mean, down to about 2 times raw. I mean, the numbers are pretty brutal. I think you're on average going to pull one in every like 4 boxes or something like that. They really went hard in the 90s in terms of pull rates, starting off.
Well, they're also just like that's just a lot of cards, man. Like one every 4 boxes. It's like it's a lot of other stuff you're gonna have.
Exactly. But I think, it's kind of nice to see that there's still demand for even like the PSA 8s, which still look very nice in the case. I mean, they're definitely, near mint to mint cards. They look pretty good.
I agree. Hey, Mark, do we want to move to your stuff real quick? I know you've put together a scatter plot that
actually, right. So you see all these nice visualizations that Cam has. So if you want to do a little bit of playing around in terms of what you might want to visualize, we have here a tracker that actually syncs with the newest version of the spreadsheet that Cam often posts in the Star Wars graded group on Facebook and the like. We have two tabs here. We have the graded tab and the sealed tab. It's worth noting that if you don't put it in log y-axis, you'll have an outlier of this wonderful BGS 95 LSJK foil here. So you may want to put it in log y-axis just so you can actually see some differences here. Although note it goes, 1,000, 110, that sort of thing because of that. But yeah, you can see all sorts of prices that have been tracked since mid to early 2021. You can see recently we have a lot of sales, maybe some a little bit down here, but feel free to dive in, subset. Maybe you're only interested in looking at PSA 10, so you could do that. You can zoom in on a section here, like, oh, I'm only interested here. You hover over it, you get the card, the price, the grade, the set, and the date of the sale, things like that. Again, this should match up to the graded tracker that
I just want to give you guys a shout out for doing the yeoman's work here. Like this is I'll include a link to this if people want to come and play around with it and kind of look at the data. So Mark and Cam, thank you for doing it's like the thankless work of capturing these sales and then putting them into sort of useful devices for people to visualize the data, because it is hard to look at. So you can also do a search, Darth Vader.
Yeah, Darth Vader, although the colors change a little bit. We're still working on ironing out some of the bugs here, but a lot of functionality here is already here, and it'll update on the site. It'll be the same link one.
So I just want to make a plug right now as we kind of look at this, that these are all tools that are available, and I'll include links to all of them. So we want people to be knowledgeable as they buy stuff, right? Like
definitely.
We want people, like, that makes a good market. A good market is not people like ripping each other off, or like, oh, I paid 20% over the average. Like, that doesn't leave anybody with a positive feeling or momentum going forward. Like, ultimately, I think our mission is not to increase prices. We want to increase the robustness and health of collecting, right? I think this is our game to collect. We want more people to also enjoy collecting it like we do. So
let me just do the sealed really quick, because there's a couple of visualizations here really quick, because I know we pulled it up. You can actually see the Premier Limited dipping a little bit recently in price. That's cool. Also gonna get in on that and rip open some packs, and then the Death Star 2 just for reference, because that was shown earlier. And this is roughly an order of release, although not exactly.
That was a teaser that we'll be ripping some Premiere on Match Channel sometime in 2023 while beer is being consumed.
Yes, I mean, we haven't mentioned this yet, but we all have holiday drinks, which I hope everyone in the audience does, even if it's like 7 a.m. Just partake.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. So it's great to have sealed on there as well. That's like nice, because I think sealed can be really hard to figure out. And we, you say go to eBay sold, but maybe this can be the future. Like, don't go to eBay sold. Actually, just like you can use these tools to better visualize and think about it. So I want to transition a little bit here to a bit of more of a discussion, because I think we want to compare what we've just talked about with the broader market. So what's the broader collectibles market? Magic, Pokemon, sports cards. Right now, Magic and Pokemon are kind of the big two that it's a little difficult, because both of them have had their own scandals to sort of like grab market trends. But generally speaking, both are kind of down on the year and are doing some retracing, I think. And I think that Star Wars is, interestingly, maybe perhaps because it's such a small community, hasn't really seen a huge amount of retracing. Cam, what's your experience been like? I know you're into sports card stuff. Have you kind of noticed any decreases or retracing or anything like that, kind of the broader sports card collectible market?
Oh, yeah. But before we get into that, we got to address one big elephant in the room, Matt. And sorry to blindside you on your own show here.
Oh, no.
But we have you on quote. Last episode is saying, and I quote, grading is lame. You care to explain yourself, or do we need to
do you want to back me up here,
I need
please?
to corner you here.
No, you're on your own.
So, I mean, I think grading like certain iconic things is interesting, but I think a large part of grading is the authentication piece, right? Like, you want your Mickey Mantle authenticated, you want your Beta Lotus for Magic authenticated, and there's nobody fabricating Star Wars stuff right now. Could this change? Yes, but it's just not worth it. So I own a
I've
bunch of
gotten a
graded
fake
stuff.
Reflections 2-pack and a Mace Windu AI. I think is fake off eBay.
Interesting. I mean, I we could get there. It's an evolving market. It's exciting. I just think graded stuff, especially below a PSA 8, there's just no market for. Like, that's my big unpopular opinion is like, who wants to buy Queen Amidala grade like PSA 7?
I'll
right?
keep this short because I don't want to derail your show, but Mark and I deserve a counterpoint here after you and Andy.
Absolutely.
Your little hot takes viral YouTube video, gaming the algorithm. I'm going to bring this back to Jim Colson, the legend. I think everyone here and in the community can embrace he's a legend. We have him on the record on one of our interviews with him saying that 90% of Star Trek CCG was collectors versus 10% players. I'm a player. I'm playing Fatty tomorrow. I'm going to take him down in the Premier vs. Hoff noob tournament. I'm both, but I'm definitely like more of a collector. Like, that's where at least my money goes because you can play GIMP for free nowadays. And the best part of my collection, after the completionist of going from the 3 areas of sealed complete sets, it was building the what I call a Hall of Fame binder of my favorite main characters. And what I have found a ton of fun collecting is getting one of each of what you consider a tier 1 main character. And maybe that starts as an 8. And then you save up your money over time, trade your way up to a 9. And that my goal is to get a 10 of all the main characters. And I think it's a fun, awesome, extremely opposite of lame way to collect cards. And I just had to say it tonight.
I knew I should have used the word lame. As soon as I used it, like,
you knew it. You did know it.
I was trying to be snappy, and I was like, oh, no. No, it's absolutely fair. I think that one of the biggest issues I have with graded is I actually don't know how to display or store it. Like, people have like those I've always used binders, and it's kind of satisfying to put a card into a binder, but it's like graded. It's like doesn't fit anywhere. But you guys have those like briefcases that look like you're like robbing a bank with it, right? Like, that's cool. Like, that is cool.
Thank you. It is cool. It's not lame. All right, Mark, do you want to say?
I have to pull my briefcase out. My cool I think it looks pretty cool, by the way. My giant.
It is cool. It's like you're going to like rob a bank, right? It's a cool briefcase.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, sorry, go for it.
No, I use drawers, and I have the briefcases also.
Yeah, I actually sold some cards locally to someone here in Seattle, and we were meeting. He might actually watch this video at some point. So hi, Brandon, if you watch this. But we walked into a what's that place, Panera, and I had like 2 giant briefcases. I walked in, and they probably were thinking like, "What is going on here?" And I just like set them down on the table. He opens the cases, and his cards inside. But,
like Pulp Fiction, where they.
Exactly. It was lovely. But yeah, I just gotta say, like, I don't know. I think in general, like, grading for card collecting is just the way people do it in terms of just like the general hobby as a whole. So I'd go with it because of the flow there. That's all.
That's absolutely true. We can continue this debate offline.
No, I just had to needle you after you snuck that line in. I watch all your episodes, and we all respect your opinion. But Mark, I think we coordinated before the show, and we were going to sneak attack you on the air to get you back.
It's good just to have these discussions. I mean, it's good that we're just discussing this. I think that like even 2 years ago, it's like you wouldn't even be discussing it. So I think that's a huge statement about grading, the fact that people have opinions on it.
Oh, this is okay. So to answer your question, my friend, business mentor for a sports card comparable, because a lot of sports card Magic and Pokemon are a lot of the driving factors that excite investors, right? Like investing in sealed Pokemon, sealed Magic, sealed Topps Finest, whatever, or the Topps Finest Star Wars. Topps Star Wars blew up too, by the way. We don't even talk about that on this show. I have, do I want to disclose the exact numbers? I use Sports Card Investor, Market Movers, my collection. I can tell you that the market is down also. I'm down like rough math 20% from buying in 2020. And I was like getting in heavy, like a lot. I was nervous you were going to say a number there. And I was like, Cam, are you okay? You're down like $7 million. It's not that bad, but I probably shouldn't say it. Like what happened in sports card is kind of, now that I'm talking about out loud, maybe what we're seeing with the rareness of the PSA 10s. But I got into, for example, 2012 Prism NBA. I'm a diehard NBA fan. That was like the first set of Prism. Those cards are just like basic silver cards. Some of them have autographs from the players. those were scarce because it was the first year printed, extremely popular in 2020. Those have tanked. What has done well and held value is the National Treasures type sets, which have like a jersey, a rookie patch, and an autograph. They're numbered to 99, aka like super high-end cards. They're thick if you haven't seen them, kind of like Star Wars Masterwork, basically. And those have actually held value. You've still seen cards sell for millions of dollars at the highest end, dating back to like the Mickey Mantle SGC 9.5 just went for 10 million. So it's like, there's a lesson there, right? It's like, there is no just like invest blindly overall in a market like it's an S&P index and get 4% returns. You have a different angle you can and should take when you invest. So, and in general, the scarce high-end things are going to not only hold value better, but grow more exponentially. And that's what I've learned from sports cards, that I think, to the point I led in with, which wasn't intentional, like the PSA 10 Mark has, like that's not going to go down. There's two of them. There's two only. I have one of two of the loose. I'm not selling that. Like for any, I'm not selling it. I only paid 500 for it. Like I don't even think I'd sell it for 5,000. So those high end ones, like we don't have any data points to discuss, but those prisms, right? Like the PSA 8 very rare foils, those are kind of going down as the macroeconomic market goes down.
So this is just a point I want to make. So people don't know this, but in my day job, I'm actually an economist. So it's like, I think about markets a little bit.
I didn't know that. That's amazing. I feel dumb lecturing you now.
No, it's good. But I think one of the things that usually happens in recessions is, you're talking about the like bottom three quartiles that are hit by it. So the extremely wealthy are fine, right? Like, and they're going to continue. Mickey Mantle cards will continue to go up in value. The extremely rare things will continue to creep up, whether it's high-end art or high-end collectibles like comic books. But it's going to be that middle segment of things that hurt. So, I mean, right now, like I would buy an Imperial Class Star Destroyer today, right? That's the rarest card, right? I think that'll continue to go up in value because there's going to be, even if it's just a couple dozen people with cash that want the rarest things. And they're not really going to be impacted by a recession. It's going to be the other, 75%, 80%. And there's going to be 20% that are either going to be buying or just sort of holding on and not really thinking about it, because ultimately this is just something in their closet that they're not actively concerned about. Okay, let's move on. I have some kind of fun hypothetical questions that I wanted to talk about. So, Decipher, the company that made Star Wars CCG, was based in DC, or it's based in Norfolk, which is about an hour south. And so I have a hypothesis that there's a huge number of Decipher execs as well as sort of employees that probably have treasure troves of stuff in their basements. Like, this is my dream of going to a estate sale and just finding like some guy that has a binder full of this stuff. And it kind of got me thinking, how do we feel about the market if there was just a massive increase in supply, right? If somebody actually opens up a basement and they're like, wow, there's 10 cases of Reflections 3 that somebody got from the factory that they just put in their storage unit, right? It's just sitting outside a storage unit in Norfolk. It's some Decipher employee who just grabbed this stuff and didn't really think about it. Like, how do we feel about a massive increase in supply and what that might kind of do to the market? Greg, why don't I start with you? I feel like you've been quiet, so why don't we turn to you?
Make me go first. I guess partly it feels to me like it would depend on how this potential seller went about things, right? Whether they literally just flood the market with everything at once or not. But I mean, I think to the point that you, Matt, and you, Cam, just made, it seems to me that like the tournament foils, the ultra rare foils, things like this, I don't see that having a significant impact on their price. Because, let's say suddenly there's like a few dozen ICSD foils out there. They'll get snapped up at probably the most recent selling price. I think you'd have to have a huge influx of those for that, for that price to go down. My thought is roughly the same for a lot of like the big name cards. Maybe for some of the low value sets, those would drop somewhat, it seems to me.
Yeah, I think I agree. One of my favorite Star Wars facts, Jim Colson told me this, but the contract with Decipher said that Skywalker Ranch got 3 cases of each set. So in Skywalker Ranch, there's just somewhere in a warehouse, like an Indiana Jones warehouse, there's 3 cases of Reflections 3, which is I think 18 boxes is 6 boxes in a case. So I just think about like, what if we just did a little mission to go get some of those. But Cam, how do you feel about this? Do you think that we're at a pretty mature spot where if you had, I don't know, 100 Luke Skywalker Jedi Knights come in, that would just kind of it'd sell for 200 to 250, and that's sort of the market price?
I don't know. I don't have a strong take here. I guess this is why grading interests me so much right now, is because I do think most has been discovered, and now it's about finding the cream of the crop. So how do we dig out those PSA 10s and those minty ones? But I'm not sure about. I would if I had to put a number on it, it's just a guess. I would say 92% has been discovered, maybe more.
Yeah, I think that every forcing event, right? So the first one might have been 2008, right? So people going into a recession, comic book stores close down, they clean out their back room, whatever. All these forcing events, COVID, recessions, economic hardship, people just time have kind of happened. So I do think most of it's been discovered, and there's not really the giant treasure trove. But I just do think that like there's going to be a Decipher executive that has like 200 of something, right? that I'm hoping to randomly find in Northern Virginia. So that's my own fantasy, maybe. Mark, do you have a take here, or?
I think you guys covered it pretty well. I mean, yeah, I think pretty much anything super high end, there will be someone with deep enough pockets that'll find a way to make it happen. Like if someone, I don't know, on the Facebook group randomly posted even 250 LSJKs, I feel like people would find a way to absorb it. Maybe not at all at like the current market price, but I feel like that's just gonna find a way into people's pockets.
I agree. So let's kind of move into predictions for 2023. I guess I'll start here. My prediction for 2023 is I think that you're going to see an increase in the classic sets, so Premier, Hoth, Dagobah, A New Hope, just because there's a lot of room to grow, right? So the sets are still pretty cheap, right? They're, $100, $200, and there's just more room to grow for a $200 set than there is for, something that's already $1,000 or, $800 like Coruscant. So that's sort of my prediction. I think in general, 2023 is going to be a difficult macroeconomic, picture, like Cam has mentioned, but it's still going to sort of see people coming into this as an outlet from the broader marketplace. So just they want to collect something fun. They want to do something nostalgic. And the most nostalgic stuff here ultimately is Premier, right? Ultimately, it's New Hope, it's Hoth. It's not like Droid CA493 from episode 1, who's like, it's like that isn't the stuff that really does it for people. Like right now, that stuff's expensive because it was short printed. But I think if you're just a random person, you're not maybe really interested. You don't resonate a lot with like Plo Koon and the Jedi Council or something, right? It's not super iconic.
Jedi Tales, bringing that back though, great series on Disney Plus.
I've not started yet. I forgot my Disney Plus login. So
mind-blowingly good. When it went in with low expectations, was blown away.
You might say that, but there is probably someone out there who does resonate with Plo Koon. I don't know if I mentioned on this show before, but there was someone who messaged me about like Baru Lars for a card, one of the graded Baru Lars, and I still haven't graded one yet, but one of these orders I will submit one to make that customer happy customer. Sorry, I just want to jump in real quick. There was I did want to discuss, for next year for 2023. I know we touched on it briefly before, but there was the $18 PSA that was infamous, as Cam mentioned, and I think that will hopefully continue to increase the amount of cards that are out there to grow the market in terms of just the volume, in terms of getting more numbers to give people an accurate sense of what cards are worth on a free market as opposed to one that's more constrained. And I think that's important because we have these much larger and more established markets of people who are interested in Star Wars CCG from areas like sports cards that have kind of delved into Star Wars actually as a way where like, well, we're kind of like done with sports. Where should we go? Let's go to like fun IPs like Star Wars. And I think that's an area where you can get this nice cross blending of people across hobbies. So I think that'll be a positive area to look for in 2023 as far as growth is concerned.
And on that note, there's been an outcry in the graded group lately about, I think it was from Matt Fox was one of them, but who they're getting their cards back like super quick right now. And they're saying like, oh, PSA is going under. They don't have enough backlog. But what are your thoughts on that as Darth Grader?
In terms of like they're just getting through them and they just don't have enough, how to say, like there's not enough demand to get cards graded for how much they can handle.
That plus there's some fear going on now of like, oh, PSA is just overhired and they're through everything and there's no demand anymore.
I don't see that. I think one of the issues right now is that $18 seems inexpensive compared to where it was maybe a year ago when the demand shot through the roof. But historically, meaning like at least a couple years ago, they would have specials as low as like $8, right? And when you have that, that's, you know, less than half of the current price, and that's just a whole different level of like, well, all these cards that are not worth submitting 18, there's a whole bunch more cards that are probably worth it at $8. So the folks at PSA are pretty bright. They'll figure out how to make it work, and I think they'll find a way to increase demand. Because yeah, I mean, there's a large group of card connoisseurs that want graded cards. Maybe the economics don't work out at 18, but I feel like if they adjust the numbers a little bit here and there, we'll be fine. It's just a matter of finding that sweet spot.
Interesting. Let's see, do we do everybody? I already forgot. We've done everybody.
I didn't jump in. I don't know that I have predictions. I feel like this is hard for me to do. I will say, if there's anything to this like cyclical wave hypothesis, then I might disagree with your take, Matt, that those early sets are going to be the ones that we see rise in 2023. You know, if they kind of were doing well this summer while the later sets weren't, they've decreased recently. The later sets have stayed relatively static. If that pattern continues, then you might see those rise. But because I have no idea what's causing these patterns, I can't speculate about where things will go.
Okay, well, let's move on. We're gonna play a little game here. We're gonna play buy, sell, hold. So it's sort of, you know, buy means you're bullish on it, hold means it's kind of neutral, and then sell is, you know, it's not good. You're bearish on it. So, you know, we'll do thumbs up for buy, you know, this fist for neutral, and then down for sell. So I have a couple here. We'll just do this quickly. So the first thing is, broadly speaking, sealed products. So things that are sealed packs. Yeah, I think that sealed stuff is always a buy. It's scarce. It's only going to become more scarce as me and Mark continue to open it. Right? It's just, every time we open it, there's a little bit less out there. So kind of moving on to Premier, complete sets. So a complete set of Premier.
I'm probably not doing thumbs down for any, but this is about as close as I'll get.
Okay.
A complete set? Yeah, I have to go with, I'm going to go down.
Okay. You want to explain yourself, Mark?
It's just, Premiere has a lot of printing issues, and it has a lot of wear just because it came out a long time ago. People played with it. So if I was buying a set, I'd be very skeptical as to the condition. Maybe some of the sellers on eBay, like you, Greg, and some of the other guys, like I might trust some of your guys' judgment. But even then, it's hard to find a set. I mean, not that it's super hard, but yeah, it kind of is. Like, to find one that is of suitable quality, like I just want to open it on my own if I was going to say grade it. That's all.
That's fair.
I mean, on the one hand, Premiere's classic, right? And so there's a lot of appeal in it, I think, almost regardless of conditions sometimes, especially when people come back.
That's fair.
But on the other hand, the reason I sort of stayed here is that it's so far. I mean, it's been bucking all the trends, and it just keeps going up. And I'm skeptical that can continue in the way that it has. But yeah.
Okay. Next on our list, we have white border sets, just as a whole, sort of white border sets.
Yeah.
It's the next step for completionists.
It is. It just feels like the one they might skip to me, right? Like it feels like there's 50% of people are like, okay, I'm good. But yeah,
I started in 2016 and I said I'm skipping it, and come to 2020, I think I made the purchase in 2021, 2022. So us completionists work in weird ways.
White border Hoth looks really great, I gotta say.
I agree. I really like my white border Hoth set. White border Dagobah, I'm happy I have it. I don't know if I would buy it. Like if I didn't have it, I don't know if I would, as a collector, seek it out. It just.
Well, I also think there's something to Cam's point, which is a lot of people start with I don't care about the white border, and then once you've got everything else, it's just there's a niche. You know?
And then you want every graded main in a PSA 10.
That's the dream.
All right. Next up, we have a Reflections foil set. So full set of Reflections 1.
Yeah.
I think there's just, for me, you got the Farm Boy Luke and you got the Darth Vader that are the super iconic, So I think there's a little bit of room there. But yeah, it's also cheap still in comparison.
It's got basically every a shiny version of just about, not every, but just about every desirable main character card. So as far as an entry point to Star Wars CCG, I think it's very appealing.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Reflections 3 foils set. That is Reflections foil set.
Kind of somewhere between here and here.
Does anyone want to take this one?
I would just say it's properly priced, and that's okay. It ran up. It's hard to get. It ran up a little bit ahead, the same way like Tesla, as an example, stock can do. And just give it a couple years till it's priced right.
I agree. Right now, Reflections 3, I think, is sitting between 2,500 and 3,000. And that's just a lot of money, full stop, right? That's, for a lot of folks. And I think there's not a lot of movement happening on them. And I think it'll be curious to see, what happens with it. But I'm not out to collect very much more of it. I also have a set. I don't need another set. Okay, moving to kind of a little more obscure stuff. Oversized cards. So there's 5 oversized cards. There's the Mara Jade, Aura Singh, Corran Han combo card. The oversized stuff. I think it's just, you talk about completionists, that they want to get everything, and this is everything, and turns out they're really hard to find. And also, no one had good binder protectors for them, so like a lot of them are really screwed up.
Very hard to find them in nice condition.
Yeah.
I've seen one BGS 5.5 graded of that.
I wouldn't even know how to ship them, because they're truly, they don't fit in anything. They just, like, mine are just like on a shelf because I don't know where to put them, right? Okay, kind of continuing on this, autograph cards. I think everyone knows my opinion on this, but
I don't really particularly like them, but I gotta say, as far as their outlook, it's
I recently had a signed Darth Vader card lost by USPS, and it broke my heart. It's like, it's been hard. I've been like emailing them, like still not found. I'm like, okay, it's been like 2 months, but I think autograph cards, these actors, have passed a lot of them, and increasingly there's also a market. I just have a buddy that's sending in one for Harrison Ford. Do you want to know how much a Harrison Ford signature is? Do you want to take a guess here?
$1,000?
$850. Cool. So, these guys, I don't know if getting a General Solo signed with Harrison Ford signature means it's worth $900. That's a totally different type of collector. But I do think that, like, Harrison Ford he's 80 years old. And so there will be this premium on his signature in the future. But I don't know if I'm ready myself to spend $850 on something like that. Okay, last couple here.
I would say that's where Topps Masterwork is a very fun set to collect if you're into autos and Star Wars also.
Yeah, I've heard that. I mean, I think this is also, frankly, moving into a lot of the sports card world where they're very good at finding new ways of making a product unique, whether it's a piece of a jersey inside or whatever, like an autograph. And I think that's kind of what autographs do, is they elevate, cards a little bit. All right, this is going to be the last one, and I'm kind of calling it the assorted memorabilia. So I got posters and signs and like kind of the weird stuff that you see every once in a while pop up on eBay where you're like, do I need a Death Star 2 poster? Or like, what's the other one? Inserts, like the general extra stuff.
I don't want to like badmouth anyone for doing it, but we're talking as an investment when I do this.
Are we trying? I like the stuff,
Yeah, same.
It's such a neat thing to collect, like in like the OTSD and the JPSD boxes. Like they're just like
Love
fun
those.
things to have. Yeah, whether they're gonna make you money, it's hard to say.
I think the boxes will. The problem with the posters is you have to have a spot to display them. So they become low liquidity, in my opinion. They kind of like just wind up in storage and disappear off.
So I'm going to confess something to the three of you that I think the coolest thing I own, I would say top 5 coolest things I own, is I have one of the original decal stickers that the store stuck up that said Star Wars CCG sold here. I got it for $75. And I'm like, I don't even know if that was the right price. Like I have no idea if I overpaid or underpaid, but
I paid $35 for mine, I think.
Damn it.
Might have been more. I'll double check.
But I'm just like, I just feel like it's one of those things where it's extremely weird. Yeah, maybe a store has one that has like 200 sitting in a pile, but I've never seen one. So I think it's kind of cool to sort of like, grab. Okay.
I just don't think you're going to be able to flip them to a lot of buyers. Is why I went like this. So no one flames me in the comments. I have some myself.
I have some of the posters and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these posters. Like, I don't have enough display space. I don't know. It is. I think that like odd stuff though, like there's an entire type of collector that wants to get into like the background and like lore of a company, right? And the inserts and posters give a little bit of flavor there.
I mean, there's also like, I mean, I have, at least, well, I mean, let's say you collect one of every set. You're not displaying all of those sets and all of the cards in them, so like you get a poster and you stick it somewhere and you don't see it, but it's not that much different from most of your collection. Anyway.
Yeah. It just feels like a posters are like meant to be hung. Like, that feels like their purpose. Okay, so we collected some questions from the audience. I think we have a pretty good little selection here. So thanks to everybody for submitting some questions. So our first question is from Brad, and I think this is an interesting one. They are curious if anyone has any insight on pricing for uncut sheets. I'm surprised at how low they sell for compared to what the singles are for. Just general takes on sort of uncut sheets.
Rafi might be the expert there, huh, Mark?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Or Wild Thing Games for some of the indoor sheets.
So yeah, my only thought on this is, one, uncut sheets are incredibly unwieldy, right? Like they take up a bunch of space because they're like rolled up and you have to put them in one of these cardboard tubes. But also, everyone underestimates how hard it is to actually factory cut cards and not have them look goofy. I think everyone just thinks, oh, an Endor foil sheets for sale on eBay for $49. I'm going to buy one. And then, I can just use like a, paper cutter. It's like, no, they look terrible. It's like very apparent.
Guilty. During COVID, I bought one and I'm like, well, one day we'll figure it out. Apparently, so I dug deep. SGC at one point had a service that would cut them sports cards for you. And I even emailed SGC to see if they still did it, and they shut it down during their inflation. So, and then after that started discussing the ethics of it all with other people, and I think that's a hot button topic too. Can or should you be able to cut and sell them? So I've laid off for that reason personally.
Yeah, it feels kind of contentious. I will also say that I think Wild Thing Games did this. I think that's how they got most of their cards. So.
Mark knows all about Wild Thing Games. Mark's the Wild Thing Games expert.
One of these days, I'll take the trip down there. I think it's in Salem, Oregon, so just a few hours away. But it's funny, you talked about cutting the cards. I think Cam, that was back when we had that group with you and Rafi, and I talked to someone actually used to work at Wizards of the Coast here in Seattle, and yeah, it's just a really involved process to get it. I mean, it's technically doable, but it's pretty involved getting them look, as they were out of the pack. So. I don't know. My opinion is if it's good enough for a PSA, it's good enough for me. But
it's fair.
Maybe if someone else cuts it, I don't know any better.
So, in conclusion, lowly priced because there's just a lot out there and people aren't really sure what to do with them. Is that maybe a okay conclusion? I mean, the common ones, right? I think the Endor ones are everywhere. I see them like all over eBay.
Mine are in a closet somewhere. I haven't looked at them in years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of unwieldy, and yeah, it's hard to convert them into actual card prices. So because of that, yeah, it probably just stays as whatever it is now.
It'd be cool to get a smaller one framed. Maybe would probably be the end game there.
Yeah, or like your favorite set, or I don't know. Okay, our next question is from Jared. He asks, when do we see pre-Endor Black Border sets starting to make significant rise in prices? It seems like most of the folks focuses on later sets and think less about the higher print run sets. So I think this is an interesting question. Does anyone want to kind of tackle this?
I feel like this is one of those, I mean, of course, these are all opinions, but in my opinion, this would be tied to a lot of I would say not traditional, that's not the right word, but people from other card collecting hobbies getting into Star Wars, because where's kind of where they go first? Well, a lot of them probably played / collected in that pre-Endor era, and it also has the characters from the original trilogy. So I think because of those two things, that might be where they go first. Because even when I'm selling graded cards, I think I mentioned before on a couple episodes previously, like the cards that have the higher premiums on the raw prices, again, maybe it's just because they're already low to begin with. People want those original trilogy characters, not the later, rarer cards. Those are the characters they like. So those are my 2 cents. It would rely on just general Star Wars fans coming in, as opposed to who was already here.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about like an attraction to value where consumers, if they see something has a price premium, they're already attracted to it. They're like, oh, this is expensive. What's better? Like I found myself like I have 2 Coruscant sets. Why? It doesn't like resonate with me that much. I think I acquired 2 because they were rare and therefore I wanted to acquire 2. So, it's like, oh, can I get 2? And now I think something similar needs to happen with the earlier sets where it needs to come more scarce, right? It just is a little bit harder to acquire, and then you're going to have sort of the price going up with that.
It's worth pointing out that the early sets didn't lag behind the later sets in terms of like percentage price increases. So if you look at their pre-pandemic prices, the early sets have increased roughly, I think, the same amount as the later sets. Not as much as the like foil sets, which had really shot up, right? But that's because they were just massively undervalued, I think, pre-pandemic. People just didn't care about foils at all, and then suddenly realized, how scarce they actually are. But yeah, so just a note, like the early sets are cheaper, but have risen in value equivalently with the later sets.
It's a good take. I'm going to continue on with our questions here. Did you have something, Cam?
For Premier, not really. I think that Mark and Greg hit on it quite well. I think it would be a good predictor of the market growing if we see those sets go up.
Our next question is about print runs. Does anyone know anything about them? We hear a lot about X tournament foil or X set was a shorter print run, but does anyone have any numbers? This is from Jonathan. I don't have any numbers, but it's all just hearsay.
I can take probably the closest we have as far as estimates go. So if you do go to the Star Wars Players Committee forums, there's a couple of threads of interest there. Actually, I think it might all be in the one thread. Actually, I started that thread where we track the numbers on the booster boxes. And we're not entirely, at least I'm not entirely certain how it relates to the print runs exactly, but if you look at the bottom of some of the later sets, they'll have a serial number on it, and there might have been some messing with it in case of intelligence and that sort of thing. There was all that sort of stuff going on, but it might give a rough estimate of how many boxes were made. But actually, for I think the first 3 or 4 sets, someone posted a link in like through page 3 or 4 of that thread, and that's how I got that figure about 100,000 Vaders. So there's actually a print run of, I know there's a print run of Premier Limited. There might have been a print run of Premier Unlimited at the time. And I think someone gave an estimate for Dagobah, Hoth, and maybe a New Hope print runs. So those ones are more well known. And the later ones, you kind of just have to have a rough guess based off of the box numbers. And that's probably the best we have to work off of. And yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think just a rule of thumb is if they included it as junk stuff in Reflections Pack, then it had a long print run, right?
So in other words, that would be what? Special edition, or sorry, Quad City, Java, and maybe Special Edition.
I think also White Border Premier is in
Yeah,
there.
White Border Premier is the other one. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a couple that like are kind of missing from that. Like, yeah. Anyways, I think that the reason that these last three sets, we always say they're a short print run, because it physically was a short print run. Right? It was like Thief Palace came out in November of 2001. So it was for sale for 2 months, and then it poof.
And there's the risk of going up for this. So like, if you do look at the box numbers, like for Thief Palace and Coruscant, those kind of cap out at around 30,000. Whereas for some of the earlier ones, like I say, Special Edition or Cloud City or Jabba's Palace. I think Jabba's Palace is on the bottom. Cloud City is in like a little thing on the inside. But those go up to like 300,000. So it kind of scales with roughly what we think the print runs are. So just some food for thought.
Interesting. All right, we got 2 questions left, guys. Buyer's market or seller's market at the moment, and then also your favorite CCG card or Star Wars CCG card. This is from Kyle.
I'm assuming that's Kyle Mullins. I would say 2023 could become a buyer's market. So I would say stay patient, and it could become a very good buyer's market, and then hold in there until 2024, 2025 when the world economy starts picking back up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a bit of a buyer's market for 90% of stuff, and then there's going to be this 10% of like the really high-end items that are hard to find. Like I still think AIs will do. I think like episode 1 stuff will do okay, but I think a lot of stuff will be easier to acquire than it was 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you guys. This seems right to me. Some of the high-end stuff, I don't know, that might not be as much as a buyer's market, but something I've noticed, this is somewhat, I'd have to look into the numbers a bit more, in a bit more detail to know if what I'm about to say is true, but I think it's true, which is that on eBay, at least, the average price of like sets going for buy it now auctions versus regular auctions, there seems to be a larger divide than there used to be. So the buy it nows are still going for a premium, but the auctions aren't going for nearly as much. And so the averages that we're seeing, which is like a slight decline, there's a kind of this seemingly stark difference. And so what to make of that, I don't know, but I think one of the reasons we might be seeing fewer auctions recently is just because sellers don't want to risk their auctions going for low. They'll just leave them at a higher buy it now price, whether sellers can hold out long enough, right? And keep those sets at these high buy it now prices. That I don't know. That's going to sort of depend on the economy over the next year. But I definitely have seen I think I've seen this in the data, but don't quote me on it just yet.
Okay, last question here. I don't know how well we're going to be able to answer this, but it's our last question. It's from Nick. And it's Japanese Hoth singles. What are worth grading versus raw if you're looking to sell? My first gut reaction to this is no red card is worth grading from Hoth. Grade a Veers or grade is Tyrant? No, not grade cards that are iconic. Yeah, don't grade Meteor Strike or Meteor Impact rather, just because a bunch of people are chasing it for sets. That's sort of my first reaction.
I'd have to disagree with you on that, Matt. I know you may have a slight bias against grading, but
I'd say grade General Veers, grade Blizzard 2, grade iconic stuff.
Well, the reason is if you're collecting Japanese Hoth, this is definitely purely a collector's area. Like there's not too many. You're not playing with these cards for sure, and in that sense, it does become very important when you're dumping, $1,000 on a random red card. Like, what condition is this in? Is it in like pretty good condition? That can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And at least if you have I think if you have a shot at least probably an 8, I think it'd be worth it considering the price to grade it, because PSA can upcharge, but there's very little likelihood they're going to charge you. Like you could probably get it by in a fairly inexpensive grading. And if you spend $20 to grade a $1,000 card, I think if you at least hit an 8, it'll help you selling to this niche group of buyers, in my opinion. But again, none of us here probably really deal too much in Japanese Hoth. You'd have to talk to the ringleader, Brian Fred, or related people. to get a proper answer on that.
Yeah, I mean, Mark's definitely the expert here. I would say for 18, if you're spending, to his point, if you're spending $3,000 on a card, one thing that PSA and SGC can do and BGS is just great and authentic, right? So it's like it's almost worth $18 to put that thing in a waterproof hard case. So like there's that argument of it. Then if you're appealing to the mass, so like the people who are buying these cards are very few. There's not many of them, right? So, and they're struggling to complete their set. So like, I disagree with Mark in that I don't think a PSA 9 or 10 is going to make the difference for them in completing their set. I think they just want one in any condition because it's so hard to get one. But I do think they should grade those people should grade those for protection. I will say that on the mainstream level, I think having a Veers and Luke graded like 10 would be, I have actually a Luke 10. Those would appeal to the mass market. So it's like there's two different sub markets in this.
I may be biased in terms of grading them just a little bit.
Grade everything.
Just grade them all. The more the merrier.
All right. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Any final thoughts from folks? It's been a heck of a year for collecting. I think 2023 is going to be a wild ride, and I'm curious to check in, in March or so and see how the first 3 months have been. But any kind of final takes from folks around the room?
Support the game, support the community. The more I get involved, the more I meet good people like Greg, Mark, and kind of Matt. I don't know about that guy.
Yeah, just have fun with it, right? Yeah, it's like it's the journey, it's the friends you made along the way, and the enemies as well. Wearing Hodor.
I was messaging with like Talaga to coordinate a game with Fatty, and messaging with Jared Knapp like right before we hopped on the show. Just all really good guys. Yeah. Support GEMP whether you play or not. I would recommend. I'm just going to shout out the Players Committee has a Premier to Hoth tournament coming up. Go to the PC forums that Mark previously mentioned. It's easy to sign up. This is how I learned. This is how Will Tarbox learned how to play GEMP. It's overwhelming at first. The best way to learn is to just hop in there and play a few games with some friends. The Premier to Hoth format is really easy to learn. So the best way, if you're a passionate fan of the game, is to get more involved with the community, join the graded group, Star Wars CCG graded on Facebook, and support the Players Committee.
Very good pitch. Yeah, like this has been an incredible year, guys. I'm so happy we've done 3 of these, and I hope people enjoy hearing us yammer at each other. So happy holidays, happy New Year. Everything else. Happy Kwanzaa. Is it today Kwanzaa? I don't know. I can't.
It actually started today, I think. Yeah.
I think so.
It did start today. That's because we were asking. That was before we were on air.
Yeah.
I would like a really quick ending thought. Yeah, we've been through. It's been a crazy couple of years, but I think we've made it. And maybe there's some scary times ahead in terms of the economy, but we got a good group here. Let's keep growing it, and just happy to be here with you guys.
Great. All right. Well, we'll see everybody next time.
All right. Happy holidays.